Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for stopping by. If you're new here, welcome. This is where I talk about a variety of music topics, whether that be modern music, classical music, teaching technique, talking about music history, whatever happens to be on my mind that day. Occasionally I talk about spooky topics and goth subculture topics, as well as my band Discord with my husband, Violin, who you met in the previous video. That was super fun. And if you're returning, welcome back. Today I thought I'd talk about a topic that all of us, whether you do music or not, have probably dealt with, and that is performance anxiety, also known as stage fright. I want to talk a little bit about what causes it and what you can do to help relieve performance anxiety to be able to perform at your best, whether that is speaking in public, having to do a presentation at work, performing on stage, of course, or maybe you have to give a presentation at work or in some form or another get up and do a speech. Maybe you're at a friend's wedding and you have to get up and speak and you've just got a little bit of the jitters. Let's get into it. So what is performance anxiety or stage fright? It is the anxious feeling, the jitters, sometimes even visibly shaking, and being nervous when you have to communicate or get up in front of other people. Typically, things that cause this is internally we build up a little bit of nerves and anxiety because we're worried. We're worried about what people are going to think. We're worried about messing up, making a mistake. And these thoughts become pervasive and then they interfere with our ability to do the task, which then causes those mistakes that you're so worried about to happen, or any number of things, which then sort of perpetuate. It becomes this cycle of more and more anxiety. One of the first things in dealing with performance anxiety is understanding what causes it. And while a lot of that begins in our mind, in our way of thinking, it also presents a problem in that it starts to manifest itself physically. So let's take a step back for a moment and talk about what's going on in our mind when we have to get up and we're under pressure to perform, to speak, to play our instrument, or whatever the case may be. It starts with the conversation that we have with ourselves in our head. And we all have conversations with ourselves throughout the day. We have thoughts that just are kind of always bubbling in there. One of the things you want to be aware of is negative self-talk. As performers, we're very critical in our own mind. Often we have thoughts about things that we're doing. We say things to ourselves like, well, that was stupid, or why did you do that? We tell ourselves that we performed badly, or you missed that note. And then we dwell on that. We get stuck in that moment and are unable to move forward. And we lose sight of the performance, we lose sight of the song, and then we lose our place. These kinds of things happen all the time. Not only have I educated where I've been, where I have to judge or critique someone who is performing, but also being in that situation myself where I felt under pressure and was very stressed. I can remember a couple of different incidences where this happened. The first time that I performed in front of anyone when I started college, I hadn't been on stage for a long time. This was a completely different kind of music. I had a piece that had what at that time felt like a really high note. Comparatively now, I wouldn't say that it is. The note sat in a difficult place and I was very worried about it. I was worried about how this note was going to come out. I felt like I was going to miss it or squeak or something was going to happen. I got nervous about this one note. I got up, was in a studio performance. So basically think of it like a classroom with other singers who had the same teacher that I did, and we were performing for each other. And I started my piece and I was singing, and all I could think about in the entire performance, I don't remember anything except, oh, that note's coming up. Here comes that note. I was just so hung up on it. And what happened? as soon as I went to sing that note, my throat tensed, I was in the clutch, and this awful, squeaky, screechy kind of sound came out. Completely just fail moment, so embarrassed. The next thing was like, well, you screwed that up. I guess you just got to finish it. And so I buckled down, I finished the rest of the song, sat down, and I was kind of mortified. But at the same time, this other thing occurred where I was like, well, that happened. Can't really get any worse than that. That's over with now. So the thing I was worried about happening happened. So now I could get over it. And that's kind of the path that I took. Now, some might take the path of just not wanting to get up there again or being, in that moment and living in it for a long time. For me, it was like, well, we're done. That happened. And I didn't have that issue again. After that, I was able to kind of get over that issue. Now, it doesn't work for everyone, but for me, it helped just making that mistake I was so worried about and realizing that it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't the end of I kept going with the song. Fortunately for me, the rest of my studio class was very understanding. I mean, they'd been there. We've all been there. Then there was another incident that occurred that had to deal with memory. So I wasn't fully prepared for my jury. Jury is basically like a final for performers when you're in college. You get up in front of your professors and you perform. You've worked on these pieces for an entire semester, and usually you have 6 to 8 pieces, and then they just pick one and have you sing it. Now, I will admit I had slacked. There were 2 songs that I just didn't stay on top of, and I didn't get the memorization done when I should have. You want to do that very early on, by the way. And I was just not fully confident in the words. It was a German piece, and I was like, please don't pick this one. Please don't. If that happens, promise you they are going to pick the one that you don't want them to pick. So you really need to be prepared. Well, I wasn't. And I got up on stage, and they picked that song. It was strophic, meaning it had a verse 1 and a verse 2. So it was the same melody twice. And of course, verse 2 is always a little less memorized than verse 1. And exactly what I thought was going to happen happened, and I forgot the words. Some performers, this is sort of a thing that you learn. If that happens, you just kind of have to make up some words until you get back on track. For me, it was a hard stop. I couldn't finish the song. I just stopped right in the middle of it. It really was the only time that happened, but it was a lesson learned. And it did not make that mistake again. Part of that was being worried that I was going to forget the words, which then in turn caused me to forget the words. So anxiety can be real problematic in that the thing that you're so worried about might actually happen. So what do we do about it? We practice dealing with stage fright, just like we would practicing performing the piece. It's all part of the same thing. So you have to be very aware of your thoughts, and you have to put yourself in a situation in a safe environment that allows you to deal with those feelings. Now, one of the things that I'll do in the lesson, we talk about stage fright. I wanted to make, especially very early on, I wanted to address it. I want my students, when they get up on this stage, to perform in whatever capacity, if it's a jury, a stage performance with others, you got to get those jitters out. You got to learn how to deal with them. You got to learn what happens physically, biologically, dealing with adrenaline, how to understand what that feels like, and so forth. Now, the first thing that we want to address is what is happening in your mind? What are you thinking about? Do your thoughts wander when you're performing? Let's say you're in the lesson. We're going through a song. We have to be aware of those thoughts. So we talk about it. If you find that your mind starts literally thinking about what you ate for breakfast or what you're going to do later that day, or a bird that flies up and lands in the window, that means you're distracted. And we have to try and find a way to sort of hone in on something that you can tangibly hold on to, something within the song, being able to focus on the melody line or the rhythm. Also thinking ahead. If we're focusing on the piece, we're focusing on our breath and the words and the performance, a lot of those other distractions start to fall away and they become unimportant. Now, when you're under pressure, when you're nervous, it becomes even more important to be able to hold on to the piece, the song, the words, not letting distractions sneak in. Like that lady in the back row is wearing this giant flowered hat, and now that's all I can see in the entire auditorium. Or somebody sneezing, or two people in studio class who are over there talking to each other, and then you're wondering, are they talking about me? What are they saying? Do they hate me? And then it just spirals from there. That's what you're trying to avoid. So we talk about that and we work through it. One of the things that I spoke of before, which is what I call negative self-talk. That's where we're beating ourselves up. We're critiquing ourselves as we're going, and we're getting hung up on, oh, well, that wasn't the right phrasing, or that note wasn't in tune. Those are things for the practice room, working those things out, being aware of those things. But that's not a thing or a place where you need to start dwelling on it, beating yourself up. Think of it like this. Joyce DiDonato did a masterclass where she talked about the voices in her head and negative self-talk. And one of the things that she said was very profound. When you are saying these things to yourself, would you say those things to your friend? You're sitting there having coffee with your friend, and they're talking about, their performance, or you saw their performance maybe. Are you going to start critiquing them and telling them all those things? I would certainly hope not. You would be encouraging. You would be saying something to them of, you can work through it. It was a good performance. You would help build them up, not push them down. You have to do the same thing for yourself. You have to understand we're moving forward, not staying in the same place. If you miss a note, you forget a phrase, you just keep going. And you have to practice moving forward. I have a lot of beginning piano students that will start the piano piece at the beginning, and as soon as they make a mistake, they have to stop and they have to go back and do it again. Well, if we did that every time we made a little bit of a hiccup, we'd never get through the song. You have to practice thinking ahead, getting to the next place, the next place, the next place, the next entrance, being really in the moment and aware of what's going on. So let's talk a little bit about physically what happens when you go into a performance, when you start playing. So you got a little bit of nerves. One of the things that I will do, or have my students do, is take 10 very slow, deep breaths. What this does is it helps quell the adrenaline. It helps kind of get everything aligned and calmer before you step out. So before I go on stage, 10 very deep breaths. I take them in and I let them out very slowly, really focusing on the breath, making sure everything is nice and full. You want very low, like yoga, type breaths. And that helps kind of squash that buildup that's going on. Now, once you get on stage, you're probably going to have a shot of adrenaline. Being aware that that's happening and what it feels like is very, very important as a performer. Because if you don't know what that feels like and it starts, the adrenaline is going to rev everything up. Everything is going to seem like it's going faster. The anxiety feeling starts to build. You might even shake just a little bit. If you don't know that you're dealing with adrenaline, then you may suddenly go into a panicked state, and that's where things get wonky. Now, if you know this is going to happen ahead of time, which I always coach everybody to kind of deal with and go through it, all that needs to happen is you just have to maintain your breath, because it's going to pass. Once that passes, you're in the clear and you should be good to go. You're not going to have another spike like that. Everything sort of just evens out, and it can really enhance your performance and really make you a little bit more aware if you can maintain your focus through that. So once that adrenaline starts to kind of creep in and you start to feel that ramp, usually happens within the first, for me, it's usually about the first 60 seconds or so to maybe, in like maybe 2 minutes, and then it'll just kind of, whoof, you're just going to breathe right through it. As I said before, focusing on the music, focusing on something tangible is really what you want to do. And this can be practiced in the lesson. If you're having lessons with your professor, or your teacher, your voice instructor, your cello instructor, whoever it is, you can start practicing it there. That's the best option. Here's another thing you can do. If you're getting ready for a performance, I recommend finding some close friends, maybe one or two. So maybe start with one, someone that you really trust, and just have them come in and sit, do your performance like you're going to be doing it, and work through that, because that's going to help give you a safe environment to deal with those jitters, to deal with what's going on in your head, and able to help you focus a little bit. Let that person know that they're your guinea pig. If you need to stop and pause or whatever and go back and do some things, then by all means do that. And I would maybe try that a couple times, maybe get a couple different people in there. It's a practice performance to prepare you for getting up. The more that you're able to practice and get in front of people, the better things are going to go for you. I would say a good portion of getting over stage fright is preparation. You want to make absolutely certain that you have put in all that time and worked that piece inside out. You're doing it in your sleep. You know every word, you know every phrase. You've got places where if something happens, you know the next section. That's something we can talk about in later videos. And honestly, talking about stage fright and dealing with it is not something that I'm going to be able to help someone with in one video. There's so much involved, so much to do that is helpful. There are a few resources and great books on performance and the way the mind works when learning music and performing music that I would recommend. And I'll leave a link of that list down below. A few of those would be The Inner Game of Music by Barry Green with Timothy Galloway. The book Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner is a great resource to have if you're a musician. Dr. Carrol's Power Performance. This Is Your Brain on Music by Daniel J. Levitin. Musicophilia, Tales of Music and the Brain by Oliver Sacks. And another one by Barry Green, who wrote The Inner Game of Music, called The Mastery of Music. If any of you have any stories about a stage fright issue, and as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to pertain to music per se, I'd love to hear your feedback and your stories. Leave those for me in the comments. Hit me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you know when videos are coming out. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope I see all of you very, very soon.